Okay, folks, today we're going to be talking about the emotional side of retiring and people getting stuck into one more year, for example. And again, this is video number 2 in a 3-part series with Defining Wealth. Kyle and Jacob, thanks for being here. Well, actually, I'm with you guys. Yeah, as you can tell, I'm not in my normal studio home where I make videos. So, um, Defining Wealth has been in a partnership with me for most of this year, and they're offering a rare service. Very rare in this industry is a $300 plan review. They do full service, financial guidance and advisor work, but for this audience, they're doing a $300 review because you've asked for it. And so I want to capture some of those experiences that people are having and share with the audience today on, stuck in one more year, afraid to retire, those kind of things. So if you could, let's go through a couple examples.
Yeah, I think the main thing, Joe, and we talked about this on episode 1, was, a lot of people reach out to us. The average investable assets are somewhere between $2 and $2.5 million on average. Again, there's some that are less, there's some that are more. But I always say, you don't build that level of wealth by accident, right? So for a lot of these people, it's that discipline muscle that they flex for 30 years of, I'm going to live below my means, or I'm going to make sure I'm at least still saving.
Yeah.
Until they get to the point where they're looking over the retirement cliff and they're like, oh man, I don't know. Like there's a lot of questions, because even spending to them almost feels wrong, because it's what they've sort of trained themselves out of doing for all of these years. And it's sort of ironic. I don't want to say funny. I almost said funny, but it's not. But it is sometimes you have a conversation with somebody. I'll give you an example. We had a conversation with it's a current client of ours now, but this was somebody that reached out to us probably about 2 or 3 months ago. Guy's a retired executive. He's like, I just can't do it anymore. But he's like, I know I can't retire. I'm like, well, why is that? Well, he's like, I've run the numbers and I'm not at 100% on my success score. I'm like 95. I'm like, well, that's still an A plus in my books. And we walked through the reality of that. And we said, hey, look if you could retire today, if we gave you this green light, would you do it? He's like, well, 100%. And a lot of times for these folks, it's just that emotional barrier of either not understanding the numbers or just not feeling confident enough to be able to do it. Another guy's another example. It's another doctor. He's up in New York. He's got several $1 million. And the irony of his situation was he wasn't fully DIY. He had another advisor at a larger firm, we'll just say. I almost
big box firm number one.
Big bucks firm, yeah. And it was one of those things where he's like, our meeting was actually over the phone. He was still trying to get home. He was a doctor and doing his thing. And he's like, it's wearing on me. I'm worn out. I can't do it anymore. And I just need somebody to be able to tell me what's possible. And for him, it's like, well, you have $7 million. Like, what are you trying to spend? What are you trying to spend in retirement?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I want to spend $18,000 a month. And as we went through the process, I was like, I don't even need to put anything in a calculator to tell you can do that. And he's like, well, how do you know? I'm like, well, you've been a doctor for 30 years, right? If somebody walks in within 10 seconds, you know what you're looking at pretty quickly, right? And obviously we did the analysis with him, and I'm like, you can not just spend $18,000, you can spend double that and buy a house in Jersey City like you wanted to on the shore, and you're still going to be fine. And it's those types of things, just high level, and that's leaving out tax planning, healthcare, all the other things we talked about. Because out of that $7 million, $5 million was pre-tax. It's like, well, has anyone ever explained to you how Roth conversions might make sense in your situation? It's like, well, no. I'm just trying to figure out if I can retire. So for a lot of these folks, Joe, we have to start high level to answer the main question front of mind. Can you retire, or what do the numbers say? And then how does that make you feel emotionally, assuming that you can do it? And then from there, how do we optimize it?
Do you think that Monte Carlo number can do more harm than good for people? I mean, it just seems like I've heard several stories like this. It's like, my career, I want to be right. I want to make the right decision. I want to get the right accomplishment. And so I want to be 100% sure my plan's going to be right. And that's not what Monte Carlo set up to do. It's you really, for me, people ask me, what should my Monte Carlo number be? I'd say somewhere in the 80s feels pretty good to me. What do you guys tell clients?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things in there to even that we could go down rabbit trails on.
Yeah.
But certainly, in that 75 to 85th percentile, that is going to indicate you have a withdrawal rate that's pretty reasonable. But it depends on your goals, right? I mean, again, a lot of folks one mistake they make is they want to die with 0, but they are shooting for a 90th percentile type of Monte Carlo score.
Yeah.
I do think it can do more harm than good because a lot of folks don't know what's going on in the background with that.
And it depends on assumptions you put in there too. Like we talked on video 1 is around, do you have high, or if you have a 13% year over year compounded annual growth rate, an 85 may be a low number.
Yeah. And I think one emotional mistake, to go down one of the rabbit holes just from something you said, one emotional mistake that folks make is they're looking for certainty.
Yeah.
Life is not certain.
Yeah.
Retirement's not certain. There are certain things you could buy to provide a guarantee, but even that's not entirely certain, right? And I think one of the things that we try to get folks to understand is, we're big believers in the fact that we're not even guaranteed tomorrow as humans. So if we're in a position where we can make retirement or financial freedom or whatever we want to call that, if we can make that a reality and that's something you're looking to do, don't wait for certainty. You'll never have it.
I think that's a great way of saying it. I sometimes say, don't underestimate your ability to adapt.
Yeah.
We can adapt. Think about COVID and all the things we've been through with COVID. We can adapt, okay? Well, what about another example of a client that had some emotional stress or challenges making the decision to retire? If you can, I'll throw you a curveball. Somebody that may have $500,000, $600,000 on the lower end.
I think they're trying to figure out for people that remember the Voya commercials. I think it was Voya that used to people would walk around with a number. And people think they need a number. Someone at least in that situation. Sometimes when people don't have $1 million or $1.5 million or $2 million or whatever it is they think in their mind they need, they don't feel confident at all. Yeah. And it's all relative because people ask us the question, well, can I retire? When should I take Social Security? Should I do conversions? Should I consider these things? And obviously, our answer to that is always it depends, because if you have $500,000, let's say, saved in, a mixture of pre-tax, taxable, and Roth, hypothetically, so you did a good job of tax diversification, and your Social Security paycheck alone is going to cover the majority of your needs because your house is paid off, and you only need a couple $1,000s to live off of in addition to that from the portfolio, you could retire and you'd be fine. But if someone's going to go out and you want to buy a new house and you're going to buy a new car the second you retire and spend all this money, well, no, absolutely not. You need to keep working, right? And a lot of it really just comes down to trade-offs and what people are willing to give up, or what they're willing to just say, hey, this is what I'm looking for in retirement, because someone's dream retirement and how they envision that. Maybe they've always envisioned it on a beach and selling their house, and the other person says, I just want to spend time with my family and be close to my grandkids. I don't need anything else fancy, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of in-betweens there too. But for us, that's typically people in that sort of under $1 million threshold. I think they sometimes get caught up on I think I need a number. I need to hit that $1 million.
Yeah, and people have pensions. People don't have pensions. People are taking Social Security. People are not taking Social Security. People's houses are paid off. It's all over the place. So a number is really meaningless. I don't think I've ever made a video on you need $1 million to retire or $2 million, because that's a meaningless conversation, really.
I agree.
So, do you think part of the problem is people are too private with their money, too private with their decisions, and they're in their own head? Is that part of the problem?
That certainly can be. I think a lot of people I think one of the values we do bring to folks is we help them benchmark, right? People don't know what's going on with other folks' money. They just see the stuff or the highlights or whatever. And so we can help people benchmark, like, what do you actually need in your personal situation to retire? What
I was thinking of is if I was going to build a house, and Kyle's built a house before, I would have no problem talking to Kyle about, hey, what did you learn? What did you do wrong? What's your cost per square foot?
Right.
What did you pay for cabinets? I could ask you all those questions. Right. But when it comes to my retirement, everybody is looking at it like this. And I think then when you're looking at it on your own, you get a little paranoid. You got all these worst case scenarios going through your head. Yep. And that's why I think the $300 plan review that you guys are offering, that is extremely rare, extremely rare. This is very unique offering that you guys have. I think it's so special because it can take those people that, they have a good plan, but they really want another set of eyes looking at it. They want to find 3 or 4 things they didn't know about, and they want confidence.
Yeah.
They want confidence.
And that's the reason we've been working with you for the whole year. To start with, they think about financial advisor. They think somebody that has to manage my money, or someone that's going to sell me a product or have an incentive to do what's not in my best interest.
Yeah.
For us, we have advice-only options, even with clients that either do a beyond the plan review, that are either a one-time plan or ongoing planning fee, where it's, hey, pay us for advice, you continue to self-manage. That's totally fine. Of course, we have clients that do the opposite, that also want us to do everything, because everybody's at a different stage of this. But for us, we always want to try to do is meet people where they're at and give them the clarity and answers to the questions that they have that they're looking for. And you can't do that by yourself. I mean, even whenever we're creating financial plans, I'm not even creating a plan by myself. Neither is Jake. We're the rest of our team, and us included, we're all CFPs, but there's different even areas in here where, hey, Blake on our team, who's an enrolled agent with the IRS, there's things in the tax planning world that he has seen, or that he knows a lot more intimately than I do. I'd have to go and look it up. It might take me a few minutes. But those are the types of things where, even if we're not DIYing our own clients' financial plans, and we're doing this all of the time, how can somebody confidently do it completely by themselves that doesn't do this for a living necessarily? Not saying that they can't. Not saying it's not possible. It's just there's a difference between, like I said in the first episode, a difference between a plan that is good or good enough, and a difference to a plan that is great. And what we're always trying to do is say, how do we continuously make the best decision? Because what we don't want to have to happen is, a lot of these people, on the reviews, or any of, new clients that reach out to us will say, had we had this conversation 10 years ago, maybe I would have been able to retire today. I wish I knew that sooner. And what we don't want, what we're trying to identify, even at the highest level of this, at just the plan review level, is to say, hey, here's your blind spots. Here's the things that 10 years from now, when you come up for air and look at it, you're going to be glad that we had that conversation.
Yeah. So there's definitely value in people that reach out to you that are 10 years away. What's been the biggest length of time to retirement that somebody has set up a review?
That's a good question. Probably about a decade. Most people are asking for a green light, and they're within.
So they may be in their late 40s, 50s, something like that, and they were looking 10 years out.
I would say that's probably the earliest from the plan review side.
I don't think we had anybody in their 30s. I think majority of it was in their 40s. But some of those people want to retire early, and that comes with different challenges. I always say, hey, that's almost like retiring at halftime. Some people are retiring at the 7th inning stretch, but if you can afford to retire at halftime, well, what does that mean? Or at least having the option to walk away and do whatever it is you want, right?
What about an example? One more year is commonly what I hear is, people, we say sometimes moving the goalpost, and working one more year, I tell people it's always going to make financial sense to keep working. It's always going to make your Monte Carlo go up. It's always going to be better. But what about a story, an individual that was stuck in one more year that maybe you guys were able to help?
Yeah. So this person actually became a client, and one of the things that commonly comes with the one more year crowd is if they have stock options or something like that at work. So specifically, this gentleman, we'll call him Jack, I guess. So he had RSUs through his company.
Restricted stock units.
Restricted stock units. Yeah. Let's get rid of the jargon. Restricted stock units, which generally speaking, what happens is you get granted these restricted stock units, and they vest, for him specifically, over 3 years. So every year he's getting new granted restricted stock units that will then vest over 3 years. So they got that golden handcuff on him.
Yeah.
And the difficult part of that is every year you're going to get more money that you were granted 3 years ago. And that feels good, right? It feels comfortable. It feels safe. And leaving, for him specifically, leaving hundreds of thousands, like $400,000 to $600,000 on the table, so to speak. That was like
from 3 years worth,
something he couldn't get past.
Oh yeah.
And so for us, working through that was, hey, what would it mean for you if tomorrow you didn't have to wake up at 6 a.m. and go to work?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
What are you doing with that time? Is it you spending that time with grandkids? Are you going to the golf course? And kind of painting that vision of what will you do with your time? What would you want to do with your time? And focusing on that positive vision for going forward.
Yeah.
helps get past that.
Retire to something, get
Yeah.
granular about what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Are you going to travel someplace?
You're going to be a handyman for your kids.
Yeah,
That's,
man, wearing me out as a 61-year-old. That is a great example, Jake, because it's, I think when I worked at Alcoa, I got my stock in June,
Yep.
and I got a bonus in January. So it was always this like 6-month
Yep.
carrot on a stick.
You're
Hey,
on the
Joe,
hamster wheel. Just keep
hey,
going.
just another 6 months and you get this carrot. And then another 6 months, you get this carrot. But everybody, and you guys see this in your business, everybody eventually stops changing their time for money.
Yeah.
Eventually, you're going to do that. Are you going to do it at 55, 60, 65, 70? Eventually, you do it.
Yeah.
And do you want to be that person that regrets when you're 75 and you look back?
You don't.
How many of the 75-year-olds say, "But boy, I should have worked 5 more years"?
Yeah.
I've said this to a couple of our clients. None of your kids is going to visit you or your grandkids is going to visit you on your deathbed and say, darn it, I wish my inheritance was just a couple $100,000 bigger.
Yeah,
Nobody's saying that.
yeah,
Nobody's saying, shoot, if you had just worked 3 more years, you could have accomplished so much for Alcoa.
yeah, yeah.
Nobody's saying that to you. So don't, and I'm not saying that working longer is a bad thing. Some people enjoy work and they want to work, and that's something that they're going to do because it brings them meaning. But other people are just afraid that without work, they don't have meaning or they don't have those dollars. And nobody, just as an encouragement to your listeners and folks watching this, like nobody's getting to the end of their life and saying, I wish I had worked a few more years or stacked up a little bit more money. And your kids and grandkids aren't thinking that about you either.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing and I'm glad we'll end on that for this episode, because this could be a whole other episode. Maybe we do uncover it. One of the things that's the harder question for us to answer, at least on a review, because we only have a limited amount of time. But I think the biggest thing truly that's stopping these people beyond the financials, we could talk about that. And that's true. Don't get me wrong. But I think it's hey, I was the executive at this company for 30 years. And I'm the guy or I'm the girl here. And this is what I do. And this is who I am. It's who I've become. But when I pull that retirement ripcord and that title is gone and I'm not doing this anymore, I'm just Kyle. Or I'm just Joe, or I'm just Jake.
Yeah.
And I don't know who that person, a lot of people don't know who that person is.
Yeah.
And obviously that bleeds into their marriage, that bleeds into their kids' lives, that bleeds into many, many different things. So for us, it's okay. On the plan review, let's solve the financial problem. That'll at least give you clarity on what comes next. And I think that's the best starting point people can have to at least start to address some of these other questions if they haven't already.
Yeah. And by the way, you've heard me say this on this channel before. I love being just Joe. You know, I was a plant manager. And it's delightful. It's a whole new chapter. I describe retirement kind of like I was graduating college and going into the real world. It's a whole new chapter of your life, and it's been great. Can't believe it's almost been 7 years, but it takes an enormous amount of courage to jump into the unknown of retirement. But those on the other side are all smiling.
Yes.
So, hey. This was episode 2 in our 3-part series. Make sure you check out episode 1 where we talked about financial mistakes and opportunities. This was on mental mistakes and working 1 more year. Our next episode is going to be on common traits of those that are ready to retire and those that are not ready to retire. Make sure you check out all 3. For Jake, Kyle, Joe, we're out.